The day I told my parents I was pregnant, the world stopped. No hugs, no tears, no words of comfort. Just four cold words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. You're on your own. If you believe family should protect you no matter what, hit like, comment, and subscribe. My name is Madison Blake, and this is the story of betrayal, survival, and revenge they never saw coming. I was 15, a sophomore at Lincoln High, living what I thought was a normal teenage life. I had friends, teachers I liked, and parents who, on the surface, seemed supportive. But the truth was, my parents' love was conditional. My dad, Richard Blake, was all about appearances. Neighbors, family friends, social media, they had to see perfection. My mom, Laura, followed his lead, keeping a polite smile even when her heart wasn't in it. I always felt small, like my opinions didn't matter. Yet, I never imagined they would leave me completely when I needed them the most. I remember the morning vividly. My room was quiet except for the low hum of the ceiling fan. I stared at the small test stick in my trembling hands. Positive. The word pregnant echoed in my head. My stomach twisted, a mix of fear and wonder. I had no idea what the future held, but I knew I couldn't hide it, not from my parents. I rehearsed what I would say as I walked into the kitchen. I took a deep breath and blurted, I'm pregnant. Silence. My father's face went pale, my mother's eyes widened, and then nothing. You're on your own, he said. I froze. It felt like the floor beneath me had disappeared. The people who were supposed to protect me had vanished. They didn't just scold me, they disowned me. Packed my room into boxes while I sobbed, told relatives that I was out of their responsibility, and instructed the school to treat me as if I didn't exist. I was 15, terrified and completely alone. My Aunt Claire, my mom's sister, reluctantly took me in. Her apartment was cramped, and she wasn't warm in the way a mother might be, but at least I had shelter. Every day became a test. Every morning, I reminded myself that survival was the only option. I worked odd jobs, babysitting, cleaning offices, tutoring younger kids. Every dollar went toward preparing for the baby that, in their eyes, wasn't my right to love. Pregnancy at 15 is terrifying. You feel your body change, your mind racing, and the world judging every move. I went to doctors alone. I bought my prenatal vitamins alone. I cried alone every night. The emptiness was suffocating. My parents had vanished not just physically, they had abandoned me emotionally. Yet each night I whispered to my belly, I'll protect you. I promise. Every kick, every flutter reminded me that I wasn't completely alone. 6 months later, Lucas was born. Tiny fingers, soft hair, a cry that made the world right for a moment. I held him close and made a vow. No one, not even my parents, would ever take away the love he deserved. I watched my tiny son sleep, and for the first time in months, I felt safe. I returned to school online, determined not to let my parents' betrayal ruin me. I graduated with honors. I found work as a medical assistant. I rented a small apartment, painted it soft yellow, and filled it with books, laughter, and toys. Lucas thrived. He had love, stability, and a mother who would move mountains for him. I didn't think about my parents. I didn't need them. I had Lucas. That was enough. Years passed. Lucas turned 5. I worked long hours, but we were happy. And then, one day, a call changed everything. It was my mother. Her voice trembled. Madison, we need to see Lucas. My heart froze. The parents who had left me alone for years were suddenly desperate for a child I had fought to protect from them. I didn't answer immediately. I let her words hang in the air. Why now? I whispered to myself. I knew the time had come. The revenge I had planned silently, over years of betrayal and survival, was about to begin. I didn't rush. I let suspense build. I let curiosity fester. I smiled faintly. Lucas didn't exist anymore. The doorbell rang, echoing through the quiet apartment. I opened it to see my parents, their faces pale, hands trembling. Gifts in their arms, a small blanket, a tiny toy truck, even a photo album they hoped would belong to Lucas. Madison, we need to see him, my mother said, her voice barely above a whisper. I smiled, calm, controlled. Of course, I said, inviting them in. But they didn't know the truth. They didn't know Lucas didn't exist. I let them step into my carefully prepared apartment, imagining the shock on their faces when reality hit. They looked around, nervously scanning the room. "Where is he?" my father finally asked, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and hope. I tilted my head. "He's asleep," I said softly, pausing. "Or at least he would be if he were here." Their eyes widened. A slow understanding began to creep across their faces. "You mean he's not real?" my mother stammered. "Yes," I whispered, letting the words sink in as stones dropped into still water. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I simply told them the truth. "You begged to meet my son," I said quietly. "You cried for a child you abandoned. You wanted a piece of my life. And now," I paused, letting them squirm under the weight of guilt. "You get nothing." My father staggered back, disbelief etched across his face. My mother sank into the nearest chair, her hands covering her face. "I raised him alone," I continued. "I protected him. I loved him, and I did it without you. Every night I wondered if you'd ever care. Now you know what it feels like to be abandoned." The silence in the room was suffocating. Their past cruelty was finally reflected at them. As I spoke, flashes of the past flooded my mind. My dad was yelling at me for being irresponsible while I cried silently in the hallway. My mom pretended everything was fine while packing up my room. Nights spent crying alone, counting pennies to buy baby formula. The first time Lucas kicked in my womb, reminding me that I was stronger than their absence. All those years of pain and survival built up to this moment. I looked at them, seeing not the parents I once loved, but the people who had caused deep emotional scars. "You begged for forgiveness," I said. "You wanted love from the child you abandoned. You thought you could reclaim what you lost." Their faces fell, words failed them. "Lucas doesn't exist," I said again, letting the finality sink in. "And that is the consequence of abandoning me when I needed you most." For the first time, they understood the depth of their betrayal. The years they had taken for granted, they would never get back. No yelling, no revenge games, just truth, silence, and emotional justice. My father dropped into a chair, head in hands. "Madison, we didn't know." "Yes, you did," I whispered. "And you still left me alone." Tears streamed down my mother's face. "We were selfish," she admitted. "We didn't think, we didn't care." "We're so sorry." But apologies could not undo a decade of betrayal. They could only sit with the reality of what they had lost, my trust, my childhood, and the life I built without them. Weeks later, I reflected on the encounter. I didn't feel anger anymore. Not the burning, desperate anger that had fueled me for years. I had achieved justice not through cruelty, but through truth and restraint. I forgave them, not because they earned it, but because I had earned my freedom. I had survived. I had thrived. I had built a life full of love, strength, and resilience. Revenge doesn't always mean destruction. Sometimes it's simply showing people the consequences of their actions, letting them live with it. I continued my life quietly but proudly. Lucas, though imaginary to them, had taught me that love isn't dependent on anyone's approval. I focused on building relationships that mattered. Friends who stayed, mentors who believed, and a life built from my own strength. I realized that healing isn't about making them suffer, it's about reclaiming your own life. And moving forward is stronger than any past. In the end, my parents left that day, silent, humbled, and remorseful. I watched them walk away, not with anger, but with understanding that I was no longer the powerless teenager they once discarded. 4 words had changed everything. "Lucas doesn't exist." And in that silence I found peace. I found freedom. I found closure. Betrayal hurts, sometimes for years. Revenge doesn't need violence. Sometimes it's patience, wisdom, and emotional truth. Forgiveness is not for them, it's for you. I survived. I thrived. And I turned their betrayal into a lesson I'll carry forever.